All right, so I'm really not sure how to start this since I'm completely against all of this stuff. Video blogging and YouTube and, well, I look like this. So I'm just going to start. My life was completely normal until September of 2018. I was 35. I have a 4-year-old, a 12-year-old stepdaughter. I am the director of development for a nonprofit for kids. I write grants. I killed it last year. I raised over $350,000 my first year as director of development. Yes, last year was an incredible year for me. And in September, my son got sick. He caught a cold. I caught the cold, and I got sick. So went to my doctor, and I said I have a sinus infection because I'm 35 years old and I know what a sinus infection feels like. I've had many since I have horrible allergies. And I asked for antibiotics, and he said, well, you look too good to be sick with a sinus infection. It's just viral, so no, you can't have antibiotics. I was like, really? Because I'm sick. I have a fever. Give me the antibiotics. And he refused. So I went home, and 3 days later I went back, and I was even worse. And I said, I'm sick. I need antibiotics. He said no. So finally I said, screw this, and I went to my ENT, who scoped my sinuses, and sure as hell, I had a raging sinus infection, is what she called it. And so bad that my right sinus had swelled shut. So she gave me Augmentin for 14 days and gave me 40 milligrams of prednisone to take for 2 weeks for 14 days. I got home, I started taking the antibiotics. I tried taking 40 milligrams of prednisone. It was awful. It was horrible. I got back spasms. Like, it was brutal. So I only made it up to 25. After 2 weeks, I was still uncomfortable. My face still hurt. She told me to keep taking the prednisone. So I kept taking the prednisone and gave me another round of antibiotics, a different round this time. Instead of swabbing to find out what bacteria it was and what it needed to go away, she just gave me different ones. So 2 more weeks of antibiotics and 2 more weeks of prednisone, 25 milligrams of prednisone. And the sinus infection still was not gone. So a week had passed. She finally did a swab. I was still taking the prednisone for another week. Swab came back Augmentin. So I did another round of Augmentin and 2 more weeks of prednisone, 25 milligrams. And this was the end of, September, October, November. This was the end of November. And finally the sinus infection was gone. Everything felt a little bit better. She told me to stop taking the prednisone. Okay, so I stopped taking the prednisone. 3 weeks later, I was completely out of my mind. Out of my mind. I was insane. I wanted to peel my skin off with a razor. I had stopped on the side of the road, and I was going to run into the forest and never come out. I don't know what I was going to do when I got in there, but I was going to do something. I just couldn't handle it anymore. So January 1st, I ended up in the emergency room with adrenal crisis. My body had completely shut down from lack of cortisol. And January 2nd, sorry, my husband called and interrupted. So January 1st, I went to the emergency room, and I was in adrenal crisis because the prednisone had shut off my pituitary and my adrenals, and nothing was sending out cortisol into my body. So I had no cortisol, and I was dying. So January 2nd, I was switched to 100 milligrams of hydrocortisone, which is a different type of steroid, which is supposed to mimic your body better than prednisone. And I was told to see the endocrinologist, make another appointment in a year, call him in a week, and we will discuss how to taper. Yes, this is what this man actually said to me. I'll see you in a year, call me in a week. Take all of these mass amounts of steroids. So I did. And I didn't know what was going on. I had never been on anything other than antibiotics my entire life. Oh, and, some allergy stuff and Flonase. So I listened, and I felt better in a week. I didn't feel crazy anymore. The peeling skin off feelings were gone, thank God. I didn't want to run off into the forest anymore. But I wasn't right at all. I was severely over-steroided. I mean, you're talking 100 milligrams of hydrocortisone. That is an emergency shot of hydrocortisone every single day. And you take the emergency shots if you're dying. And I was taking the equivalent of that every day. But I was also taking the equivalent of that every day of prednisone for 3 months. So whatever. I mean, I was on mass amounts of steroids. So within a week, I started gaining weight. I was 130 pounds when this started. Within a week, I had gained 10 pounds. I had developed Cushing's already. I started growing a buffalo hump on the back of my neck, and I started getting squish everywhere, and my face started puffing up, and everything started swelling, and I started titrating. I started coming down on my meds, and I was doing really well. I was dropping 10 at a time. It was going good. I took my 4-year-old. 2 weeks later, he and I drove from New Jersey to Florida. I drove on mass amounts of steroids. I was probably freaking crazy at that point. Actually, I was completely out of my mind at that point with steroids. I probably had steroid psychosis. Who the hell knows? But I drove to Florida with my 4-year-old, and we went to Disney, and we went to Legoland, and we had a really great time. I felt horrible. But yeah, so now it is, what are we? We're in July 12th, 2019. I am currently at 45. Okay, I started at 100, and I am only at 45. I'm never getting off of this shit. I just don't see how that's even possible. I will explain later, why, and every time I get down, every time something happens. But this is my journey. This is my adrenal steroid-induced secondary adrenal insufficiency story. And I don't really believe in this stuff, but you know what? I'm suffering, and if my story can help somebody else, if someone else can learn something from the crap that I have gone through, then it's worth it, right? Not worth it. I mean, no one should ever have to go through this, but at least there's a point to my suffering, right? Someone else can learn something, and at least it wasn't in vain. Yes, I know I'm driving, whatever. I'm paying attention to the road. You can clearly see I'm not looking at you. This is the only time I have. All right. Thanks.